everybody. This is Roger Saracen. Welcome to the Sports Deep Dive podcast. Today I'm joined by my co-host Brian Kaparick. Brian, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Rogers. How are you?
I'm good. Today we're going to take a look at the 1919 Black Sox Scandal from Major League Baseball.
Oh, scandalous.
I don't know if you read the news there, Brian. But the commissioner of baseball recently reinstated. That's the right word we're looking for. The Black Sox players, as well as former Cincinnati Reds player Pete Rose.
That's correct.
So
Very shocking.
Yep. So we're going to talk about the Black Sox. Before I do, I wanted to set the scene, so to speak, and talk about the 1919 Major League Baseball season.
I think that's awesome.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, so the 1919 Major League Baseball season began on April 19th. The 1919 schedule consisted of 140 games for all teams in the American and National League. Each league had 8 teams.
Okay.
All right, so here are the teams in the league. The American League, they had the Boston Red Sox, the Chicago White Sox, the Cleveland Indians, the Detroit Tigers, the New York Yankees, the Philadelphia Athletics, the St. Louis Browns, who we've talked to in a previous podcast, or talked about, and the Washington Senators,
okay,
who we've also talked about because they would later become the Minnesota Twins.
Right.
The National League consisted of the Boston Braves, the Brooklyn Robins, who would become the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1932. I just want you to know that. The Chicago Cubs, the New York Giants, who would move to San Francisco in 1958. The Philadelphia Phillies, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the St. Louis Cardinals. So those are the teams in Major League Baseball. Each team was scheduled to play 20 games against the other 7 teams. 140-game schedule format had been previously used in 1903. In 1918, so the year prior, teams played up to 130 games because of World War I. The 154-game schedule was reinstituted for the 1920 season.
Okay.
So you had the 19.
We're you had the in between period here.
Yeah, and it was really because of the World War.
Right.
1917 was 154. 18 was the 130, and I say up to 100 or up to 130 because some teams played more, some teams played less, type of thing. 1919 was 140, and then 1920 they would go back. I've got a list of the stadiums that each team used, and I wanted to go ahead and read to you the capacity of each, which is different from today's capacity, well, except for the parks that are still around.
Okay.
Boston Red Sox played in Fenway Park. They still do capacity 35,000. Chicago White Sox play at Comiskey Park, 28,000.
Okay.
Cleveland Indians played at League Park, 21,414.
So Fenway so far is the biggest.
It is the biggest so far. Let's see, the Detroit Tigers, your favorite, Navin Field, 23,000.
That's right.
New York Yankees actually played in Brush Stadium, 36,000.
Okay.
They had not yet gotten to the house that Ruth built.
Right.
Philadelphia Athletics, Shibe Park, 23,000. St. Louis Browns and Sportsman's Park, 18,000. Washington Senators, Griffith Stadium, 27,000.
Okay. So Yankees have the biggest stadium, but the Red Sox are not far behind at that point.
And so the smallest is the Browns in Sportsman's Park at 18,000. And we talked about that, I said in the previous podcast.
Yeah.
Here we go. In the National League, the Boston Braves played at Braves Field at 40,000 seats. Take that, Yankees.
Bam.
Brooklyn Robins played at Ebbets Field at 30,000. The Cubs were at Weigman Park, 15,000.
Ooh.
Cincinnati Reds played at Redland Field, 20,696. New York Giants played in Brush Stadium, 36,000. So the Yankees and Giants shared a little pad.
Right.
The Philadelphia Phillies played in National League Park, which was 18,000. At some point, they would go to Shive Park and share it with the Athletics. The Pirates played in Forbes Field at 25,000, and the St. Louis Cardinals played at Robinson Field at 21,000.
Okay.
All right. National League Opening Day took place on April 19th when the Brooklyn Robins defeated the Boston Braves 5-2 at Braves Field. That was the first game of a doubleheader. The Robins, like I said, became the Dodgers in 1932. Now, American League Opening Day, and then most of the other National League's Opening Day took place on April 23rd. This has been, previous seasons, this trend, when teams have different opening days.
Right.
Unlike, this year, you've got some teams that'll open up like on a Monday and some might open up on a Tuesday, but basically everybody starts around the same time. The National League regular season ended on September 28th, while the American League regular season ended on September 29th. This was the first season since 1915 which saw both leagues end on different days. And 1903 was the year that the leagues began and concluded on different days. The World Series would begin in Cincinnati on October 1st. Okay. Let's take a look at those standings, shall we?
Let's do it.
Chicago White Sox lead the American League. They won 88, lost 52. Cleveland Indians were second, 84 and 55. New York Yankees were 80 and 59. Detroit Tigers were 80 and 60, 8 games behind the White Sox. The Browns were 67 and 72, 20 and a half games behind. So the Browns were in last place. Yay! Boston Red Sox 66-71, the Washington Senators 56-84, and the Philadelphia Athletics were 36-104.
36-104.
Winning percentage of .257, and they were 52 games behind the White Sox.
That's a lot.
National League saw the Cincinnati Reds winning the league. They were at 96-44, winning percentage of .686. New York Giants were 87 and 53. The Cubs were 75 and 65. Pittsburgh Pirates were 71 and 68. The Brooklyn Robins were 69 and 71. The Boston Braves were 57 and 82. The St. Louis Cardinals were 54 and 83. And the Philadelphia Phillies were 47 and 90, a winning percentage of 33-43. They were 47 and a half games behind the Cincinnati Reds.
Whew.
So the thing here, it looks like, is that the Philadelphia Major League Baseball was not very good in 1919.
Right.
Both Philadelphia teams finished last in their league.
Last.
All right, so let's move on. That's the 1919 season for you in a nutshell, so you know where we stand.
Right.
All right, now Charles Kaminsky is the owner of the Chicago White Sox. He played in Major League Baseball from 1882 to 1894.
Okay.
Now, he's also was resented by his players because he was known as a penny pitcher. And when you work for somebody, you don't necessarily want them to be a penny pitcher.
No.
So, all right, but let's go back to Kaminsky as a player in 1882 to 1894. He, as a player, had taken part in the Players League labor rebellion in 1890. All right, so let me tell you what's going on. So back then there was only one major league. I mean, there was only one, and it was the National League.
Okay.
And that was it. The players felt the National League's policies were oppressive, so they, rebelled and formed the Players' League. The league only lasted one season, 1890. And then they came back and we're sorry.
We'll play.
As you know, because we've talked about it before when we talked about the Browns, the American League was established in 1901. And before it was the American League, it was called the Western League.
Okay.
All right. All right. Let me go back to a little bit of baseball business, a little business history for you.
Okay.
Baseball reserve clause, which was established in 1879 by the National League, says that any player who refused to accept a contract was prohibited from playing baseball on any other professional team, under the title of organized baseball. Players could only change teams with permission from their current team.
Meaning, like, if I play for the Yankees,
yeah.
I can't just go get I can't refuse a contract and then go get a contract somewhere else.
Right, with the Tigers.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right. I have to at least entertain that or get permission to move to the other team.
Yes.
I got you.
I mean, if you try to do that, you'd be kicked out and you'd have to play baseball for the local sawmill.
Right.
Or whatever. Players had no bargaining power, considering the Major League Baseball Players Association would not be established for another 47 years in 1966. So today we know that one of the
most
powerful unions is Major League Baseball's Player Association.
Right. But not then.
But not then, because it wasn't even established yet.
And
1966. No, yes, 1966 is when it was be established.
All these shyster owners are the ones in control at this point.
Right. So Kaminsky was. I just want to set it up that he was kind of part of that. I mean, the owners were like, "You play for us, or you don't play, or whatever."
Right. Right.
Type of thing. So, because of that, gamblers or outside influence could find willing players to play for a little extra cash.
Right, especially if you have a penny pinching owner.
Yes. So, all right. So at the time, the White Sox clubhouse was divided into two factions, right? One group was more of the straight-laced players, a group that included players like second baseman Eddie Collins, catcher Ray Schalk, pitchers Ray Faber, and Dickie Kerr.
Okay.
The other group would largely be made up of players that be given the Black Sox label. The two factions rarely spoke to each other on or off the field. And the only thing they had in common was they hated Charles Kaminsky.
Okay.
But, I mean, like I said, the straight-laced players is, the clean socks, as they were later. I mean, they hated it, but they wanted to follow the rules. And so if a gambler approached them and says, "Hey, how about a little extra dough if you, throw that game against the, Detroit Tigers?" I'd be like, no. All right, September 18th, 1919. So the postseason hadn't started yet, but we're kind of
close.
We're winding down the 1919 season. White Sox player Chick Gandol met with Joe Sport Sullivan, a Boston bookmaker.
Okay.
And they met at a hotel near Fenway Park.
Sounds like the kind of guy that'd break your legs.
I can neither confirm nor deny that, Brian. right, so the two men discussed plans to throw their upcoming series with the Cincinnati Reds for $80,000. We're talking about 1919 money.
That's a lot of money.
So what's what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to get my little conversion chart, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to pull that baby up and put in $80,000
in
1919 is how much in 2025? We're looking at $1.4 million and 82 cents. So we're looking at $1.4 million.
In today's money, when you talk about today's player salaries,
right,
is like nothing.
Yeah.
But $80,000 then was life-changing money.
Right.
Right? I mean, it would be... I know that that's the equivalent dollars to dollars, but really when you think about it, it's more like one of these, $23 million a year contracts to a player then.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, yeah.
So they met, throw the upcoming series for the Reds for $80,000. 2 days later, a meeting of White Sox players, which included people who were like, let's do this thing. And other people that were like, I'm just listening. I'm just, how's this going to work? That type of thing, right?
Right.
Took place in Gandel's room at the hotel in New York, at a hotel in New York City. Buck Weaver, the team's third baseman, was the only player to attend the meetings who did not receive money. But he was later banned, along with the other Black Sox players and the commissioner at the time.
Because he didn't tell anybody.
Well, yeah, for knowing about it, but not reporting it.
Right.
So, we got a utility player who really doesn't play much, right? Just is supposed to spell the players during the season, and that would be infielder Fred McMullen. And he says, "Hey, you heard about it?" And he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna tell the boss. I'm gonna go to the manager, and unless you make me unless you give me a cut."
Blackmail.
Yeah, and which is funny because there is no honor among thieves, I guess.
None.
Shoeless Joe Jackson. Have you heard of Shoeless Joe from South Carolina?
Heard of him.
Was mentioned as a participant, but it did not attend the meetings, and his involvement remains disputed. And so, here's the thing: these guys meet, and they're like, "Well, we got to get Shoeless Joe. We got to get Shoeless Joe."
Otherwise, this guy's amazing. And it's going to be hard to throw the
we got to get Shoeless Joe, but Joe never attended these meetings, and so they're like, there's some question in history about, were you involved? Did you know, or what? Are you like Buck Weaver? You knew about it?
There is no proof that he ever got money either, right?
That would be correct, but
Yeah. I know. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting ahead of you. I got you. Sorry.
Now I told you about one of the pitchers that was in the straight lace camp, as you would say.
Right.
Faber. So he got sick with the flu, and so the Black Sox, or the players who wanted to throw this, were like, "This is fantastic because he's our ace. He has the flu. He's not going to be able to pitch."
So that's one thing down.
Yeah, they're like, "Great,
we can pull it off."
So years later, Shalkwood said the fix would not have happened if Faber had pitched because, he's the ace, he's straight lace, and so he's gonna do everything he can
to win
to get that victory.
Right.
Because
he wants to win a pennant.
Right, and a championship.
A championship. No, he already got the pennant.
Right, yeah. And so. And I bet you there might have been something in his contract that says, "Hey, you win a World Series game, you get a little extra in your paycheck."
Right.
But even then, little side note, Kaminsky was known to try to weasel out of those agreements.
The extra ones?
Yeah.
Like he'd find some way to...
Right.
Oh, I said if you...
Like for instance, there was... I think
on a Tuesday.
I think there was a clause about pitcher starting so many games, or and toward the end of the season, he would order the manager. It's like, don't start that guy.
Put him in one inning.
And he's like, yeah, because he'd be like one short.
Right.
And it's like, but I didn't. The manager didn't put me in. I'm sorry, you didn't make it. No $100 bonus for you or whatever it was. Yeah. All right. So Faber got the flu, couldn't start. Schalk said if Faber had started, they wouldn't have been able to pull it off, right? So instead, those starts went to two of the alleged conspirators. Lefty Williams was one of them. And then Eddie, and then you're going to have to help me pronounce this. Cicotte. I can't. I'm sorry, fans. If any White Sox fans are out there and are yelling at me right now. Cicotte. Cicotte?
Side-tote?
All right. Yeah. Again, fans, I'm sorry. Please.
Terrible.
Please. So, all right. So we talked about the Boston guy, right? But there was another guy called Arnold Rothstein that got kind of wind of this, and kind of wanted to be in it. And when there were rumors about stuff that made that changed the odds,
right,
in Vegas, or because some people were putting a lot of money on the Reds to win, these gamblers, and of course that changed the odds. And it's like, because before the series began, the White Sox were favored, even though the Reds had won more games in the National League. The White Sox were still favored. Okay. In fact, game one was October 1st. And I'm not going to go through every game and say, in this game, the shortstop booted the ball intentionally.
Right.
I mean, look at the box scores, people. But October 1st, the day of the game one, there were rumors that there was a fix going on. Excuse me. So, and these rumors reached the press. So you had Hugh Fullerton of the Chicago Herald and Examiner, ex-player manager Christy Matheson, said, why don't we compare notes on any plays and players that we find questionable as we watch it, and then at the end of the series, we'll just compare notes, and if we agree on a majority of them, then we know, hey, something's then we'll know, right? Lefty Williams lost 3 games, which was a series record. Dickie Kerr, who was a rookie who was not part of the fix, won both of his starts because,
he wasn't part of the fix.
Right. But at this point now, the gamblers were kind of reneging on their payments.
Uh-oh.
They were pulling Charles Kaminsky. And so the players were like, well, screw you, then we'll
go win.
Yeah, we're going to win. Which I told you that a lot of those gamblers had put their money on the Reds to win the series.
Right.
And so they're like, cheese and crackers. So, and again, I don't know if you know this. I don't know if I've said this, but back then, 1919, the World Series was a best of 9.
Oh no, you didn't say that, and
yeah.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, it was a best of 9.
Best of 9.
So, so they won. White Sox won Game 6 and Game 7 to kind of, middle finger to the gamblers.
So now they've won 5 of 8, right? Because they dropped the first 2.
No, right now the score is 4-3.
4-3. Okay.
In favor of the White Sox.
I got you.
Because Cincinnati has won 3.
Right. The 3
that lefty.
Yeah, the lefty pitch.
So before Game 8, no, it must have been. It must have been 4. No, it was 4-3 Cincinnati after Game 7. Because the World Series concluded in 8 games.
Oh, okay.
So it must have been. Anyway, before Game 8, this is how the gamblers retaliated for that. They were like, well, we'll just threaten their families.
Right.
Like, hey, it sure is a nice boy you have going to, Chicago Elementary School or whatever. It sure would be bad if you had a little accident on the playground. Stuff like that. Right? Whoa, I'm just saying. It would be bad if you had a little accident on that slide, That would just be bad. All right, so so the White Sox lost, of course, to the White Sox that spooked them. So, all right. So they lost Game 8 in the series on October 9th, 1919. Cincinnati Reds, world champions. Woo! Besides Weaver, the players involved in the scandal received $5,000 each, equivalent to about $91,000 in today's dollars. Scandal taking $35,000. A little over 700 or something around on those lines in our dollars. 700,000. That's what I meant. So that's what happened. That's the Black Sox Scandal, right? And you're probably thinking, well, why is it a scandal? It sounds like that they got away with it. Cincinnati Reds win. The 1919 world champion Cincinnati Reds. All right. No. Grand jury comes about in 1920. And so the rumors, you win the World Series, you've got the whole off season. And if you think it was bad now, if you think it's bad now, the hot stove league, as they call it, just think about all of that, right? So you had that swirling around in the off season, and then the 1920 season goes, and wherever the White Sox goes, on the road, you got fans yelling at them, "Hey, buddy, you gonna drop the ball on this one?"
Right,
and stuff like that. Stuff like that.
Right, because the fans got to be livid.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they had a great team. They should have won it all. And, what happened? How did that even happen?
Right. And remember this year, in this time, the two leagues were separate.
Right.
So it's not like, they would play the Reds in the regular season. The Reds would be like, look at that pennant hanging up on our flag there. That says that we're the world champions, you bunch of losers.
Right.
The Reds played, the National League, and the White Sox played the American League. All right, so 1920, White Sox are battling the Cleveland Indians, now known as the Guardians, for the American League pennant. September 1920, a grand jury was convened to investigate. That pitcher whose name I couldn't pronounce, Cicottei, Coyote, or anyway, he confessed to his participating in this scheme to the grand jury on September 28th.
Woo!
I guess he was feeling pretty guilty.
They had him. They had him somehow.
All right, so we got the final season series coming up.
Right.
Guess who's in the final series of the season playing? I'll just tell you. The White Sox and the Indians. So the White Sox were in a virtual tie for first place with the Indians.
So the
Sox would need to win all 3 of their games. I'm sorry, it wasn't. They weren't playing each other last series of the season. The the Indians had like more games to play.
Oh, after the series.
Yeah.
So they needed to win them all to be able to be on top.
So what did Kaminsky do? He suspended 7 White Sox that are still in the majors. Yeah. Gandel was the one that hadn't returned to the team in 1920 and was playing semi-pro ball or whatever. But the other 7
were still there.
Kaminsky was like, "I'm going to suspend you," and he did it because he could care less if they went to the World Series again. The owner, he was going to suspend them because of money. It's like, if these 7 aren't playing, then they don't get paid. So so it's not like Charles Kaminsky was
this righteous guy.
Yeah,
he was just a douchebag that didn't want to pay his players, and he found a loophole to be able to suspend them.
In fact, the Sox played. I was mistaken for it. The Sox played the final series against the St. Louis Browns. They lost 2 of the 3 games, finished in second place, 2 games behind the Indians. The Indians went on to the 1920 World Series.
And Kaminsky just didn't pay them, and then got to blame it on them why they didn't win.
Yep. The grand jury issues its decision on October 22nd, 1920. 8 players and 5 gamblers were implicated. The indictments included 9 counts of conspiracy to defraud. The 10 players not implicated in the gambling scandal, as well as manager Kid Gleason, were each given $1,500 bonus checks by Kaminsky in the fall of 1920.
Wow.
The amount equaling the difference between the winners and the losers' share for participation in the 1919 series. So he kind of did something.
He did one thing right.
Yeah.
Or nice or whatever.
Yeah. So we're going to trial.
So they're all been indicted.
Mm-hmm. We're going to trial. Trial commenced in Chicago on June 27th, 1921. So almost 2 years after the incident, right? It was delayed because 2 of the defendants claimed to be ill.
Oh, I'm sick.
Mm-hmm. Before the trial, key evidence went missing from the Cook County Courthouse, including the signed confessions of Keote and Jackson, Shillis Joe's, who subsequently recanted their confessions. Some years later, the missing confessions reappeared in the possession of Kaminsky's lawyer.
Oh.
I'll just leave that right there.
Right.
All right. During jury selection on July 11th, several members of the current White Sox team, including Kid Gleason, the manager, visited the courthouse, chatting and shaking hands with the indicted ex-players. At one point, they even tickled Weaver, who was known to be quite ticklish.
Okay.
Jury selection took several days, but on July 15th, 12 juries were finally selected in the case. Trial testimony began on July 18th. Prosecutor Charles Gorman outlined the evidence he planned to present. The spectators added the bleacher appearance of the courtroom. For most of them were in short sleeves and collars, were a few. Kaminsky was called to the stand, became so agitated with questions being posed by the defense that he rose from the witness chair and shook his face at the defendant's counsel, Ben Short. All right. So I'm not going to tell you everything that happened in the thing.
Trial.
Right. Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
That's a mouthful.
That was his name.
He's from Georgia.
Signs the agreement to become baseball's first commissioner on November 12th, 1920. Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Okay.
Long before the scandal broke, many of baseball's owners had grievances with the way the game was being governed by the National Baseball Commission.
So it was right, because it was a committee before that, right?
Yeah. So, some of these owners went to Judge Landis and said, look, we need somebody who's firm and fair to clean up baseball.
We got this big scandal going on. Who knows what else?
But the owners came to Judge Landis and said, we want you to be a part of like a 3-member commission, right? And Judge Landis said no. It's either I'm going to do it by myself or you're not going to get me. And basically he wanted unchecked power. And so the owners reluctantly agreed to give him unlimited power. And it was kind of controversial for that to happen.
It's been that way ever since, though, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. One of his first acts as commissioner was to use his new powers to place the 8 accused players on an ineligible list. A decision that effectively left them suspended indefinitely from all of organized professional baseball. They could still do some semi-pro stuff, right? And you're probably saying, well, what happened? So Commissioner Landis said, you're out, right? But what happened in the
trial?
Yeah. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning verdicts of not guilty on all charges for all of the accused players. And that was on July 28th.
So they were never convicted by the grand jury.
Yeah, they were
or by the jury.
They were not guilty. Right? So the court said we're not guilty, and they're like, hey, we're not guilty, but obviously Kennesaw
was like, no.
Mountain Landis was like, yeah, you're out. And they're like, what the hell? And this was Commissioner Landis's ruling, and I'm going to read you his quote, right? Regardless of the verdict of juries, no player who throws a ball game, no player who undertakes or promises to throw a ball game, no player who sits in confidence with a bunch of crooked ball players and gamblers where the ways and means of throwing a game are discussed and does not properly tell his club about it will ever play professional baseball. And so if you notice in that thing, he answers Buck Weaver's defense of, I didn't take any money.
Right.
I didn't throw a game.
Right. But he's like,
you knew about it, right, and you didn't tell anybody about it.
Which in reality, even if he had told them about it and they suspended those players ahead of time, the White Sox still would have lost. But then I guess everybody would have known and they wouldn't have been betting on it. So the effect would have been gone.
Yeah. All right. In 2025, Commissioner Rob Manfred reinstated the Black Sox along with several other now deceased players, one of them being Pete Rose.
Right.
Now, basically he reinstated them. And, they could be eligible for the Hall of Fame. Some of the White Sox, most of the White Sox may not have Hall of Fame type numbers, and so it may not affect them.
Only Shoeless, probably.
Probably, yeah. And then Pete Rose.
And Pete Rose. Right.
Mm-hmm. So, I just real quick going to tell you the players. Arnold Gandel, first baseman. Eddie Chicote, pitcher. Oscar Felish, center fielder. Shoeless Joe Jackson, outfielder. Fred McMullen, utility infielder. Remember, he was the one that really didn't have any action, but said, "I'm going to tell. I'm going to tell." Charles Reisberg, shortstop. George Buck Weaver, third baseman. Claude Lefty Williams, pitcher. And like I said, he went 0-3 with a 6.63 ERA in the World Series. So that's basically it. I wanted to tell you a follow-up, though, is this scandal in popular culture. There's a book called 8 Men Out, Black Sox in the 1919 World Series that came out. And 8 Men Out, a 1988 film, was based on that book.
Yeah.
And the book took the court records of the trial and court transcripts and kind of put the book together. I don't know if you remember that. John Cusack was in that movie. Charlie Sheen was in the movie. John Mahoney played manager Kid Gleason.
It was a good flick.
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd was also in it. I don't know if you remember the 1989 film Field of Dreams.
Oh, yeah.
Discussed the scandal and featured two of the players involved. That'd be Shoeless Joe Jackson, played by Ray Liotta.
Right.
And Eddie Cote was also part of it. So, yeah, that's just a small thing. So now we're, like I said, the 8 Black Sox are now eligible.
It'll be interesting to see if either Shoeless Joe or Pete Rose get nominated for the Hall.
Yeah, and we can talk about Pete Rose and about his being ineligible until another podcast.
And that would be a great podcast because Pete Rose was quite a character. There's definitely a lot to talk about with him.
Yeah.
And his career and all that. But yeah. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, I mean that's some pretty good information. So
yep. And this podcast ran a little bit longer than our usual podcast, sports fans. But there was just so much information that I wanted to get over to you. So I hope if you're still with us, thank you. And if you know of somebody who dropped off because they were bored of this podcast and this subject, well, tell them to go somewhere else. Anyway, so with that in mind, this is Roger Harrison. I'm going to sign off. But before I do, Brian Koperick, you are also in the social media world. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can get me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Random Things with BK. And yeah, enjoyed it, Rogers.
All right, and I'm on Blue Sky at 318 North. Until next time, everybody, so long.